Hi, everybody. This is April Biss. I just wanted to quickly give you guys some suggestions. And I saw that somebody submitted this logo for discussion. And I wanted to kind of bring this up because I think this is an important thing to talk about. And that is your overall shape of your logo is super important. And why is that? Because think about all the ways that your logo is going to be applied. Sometimes we kind of get stuck and think, okay, it's only going on stationery, it's only going on an envelope, it's only going on a business card, but that's not the case. It can go in tons of different materials, either printed or even online on the web, on the actual web. So think about all the different materials that it could be printed on. And this is why it's super important to keep your logo very versatile, shape-wise, and also as simple as possible within your mark, so that when your logo is applied to different materials and in different shapes, products, you name it, it's going to be versatile and it's going to work. So think about it. I always like to tell my students, think about, does your logo, would it work if it was etched in glass? You know, because you think about storefront doors, for instance, and logos can be etched in glass on doors. What about being burned in wood? What about being printed on materials? So all of those things, think about, will your logo actually be versatile enough to be applied to those materials? What about shapes? Think about, would your logo fit very nicely on a pencil, as small as a pencil? Would the shape allow that? So when thinking about that, you want to make sure everything's very simplified as much as possible. You don't really want to have any gradients, for instance, in your logo, because that's very hard to replicate in certain instances. But one thing I wanted to point out, and this is kind of caught my attention today with the discussions, and this particular student did a great job with the logo, and I had to actually trace it so it looks a little different, probably a little worse here as far as like quality wise. But I just wanted to give you the gist of the comments that I gave to this student, and that how it's relative to what you guys are doing as well. So when you're designing a logo for a client, you want to make sure that it's versatile enough. So if you have a more, say, a longer shape or a taller shape of a logo, you might want to design another logo to go with that. And it's okay to have more than one logo. You know, some go out there, you go into Dick's Clothing and Sporting Goods, for instance, and you see Adidas, you see Under Armour. Take a look at all their different adaptations of their logo mark. Sometimes you see the little mark only. Sometimes you see the name as a different, orientation, but it's all very consistent. When you're like a big brand, a big recognized brand like that, the mark alone is enough to get their brand across because they have brand recognition. Not all companies can do that though until they're actually well known and universal. For this particular case, Paws and Claws is a very small type of a business, so they need to have their name in there to understand that this is their mark and this is their name. For this instance, I would probably tell this student to do two different types of logos. I would keep this variation, and then I would also do a vertical variation, more of a vertical symmetrical variation. So I would actually place this paw above the logo itself, and I would center it with the name. And you can see if I were to draw like a little square around this, it's a little bit more symmetrical. Do this here. Then the one below. The one below is very long, okay? So if I were to draw a square around here, rectangle, I should say, you can see these two shapes are totally different of this logo, but it's the same logo. It's keeping the consistency. The only difference is the mark is changing position. So there are instances where you will want to do two variations of your logo. When you show two variations of your logo, if you ever do a brand book, which you guys are going to do at the end of this class, you want to show both variations in your brand book. so that the client knows and that everybody else knows that, hey, if this isn't going to fit, say on a particular application, use this variation. This one would be maybe better to use on, say, an envelope, or say on a t-shirt, or bags or bottles, or whatever is inclusive to your accessories and your materials for your brand identities. So I just wanted to bring this up because this is important. Sometimes we don't realize and think beyond what we're doing. And I think it's important that we discuss this. Another thing that you might want to do, scale your logo down. I always like to say scale it down to about 1 inch or 1.5 inches. And is it readable at that size? Because this is, pretty much the size it will look like on your postage stamp, like say on your envelope. Test it out. Print it out, see what it looks like. Can you read it? If not, make adjustments. Another thing to play around with, how would this logo look on a darker background? Just by putting a darker background, let's put like black, it has to be a neutral. What will need to be changed with this logo in order for it to work? Well, obviously we would need to change the color to white, certain things to white, certain things to black. So I would definitely, give this a test. This is sketched out so you can see it looks terrible, but I didn't have the Illustrator file, so I'm kind of going with what I have here when I sketched it out, image traced it out. But test it out on a darker background. Just a black background would be all that you need to do. And what needs to be changed. Show what it would look like in that color. Of course, I have this little lotus that would need to be changed in here, but make sure that it works. And that's how we test it out. That's how we know, okay, well, if we're using it in white on a darker background, maybe certain things need to change. So you're showing that. All right, well, I hope this makes sense and makes you more aware. Test out your logo, make sure it works, different sizes, scaling it down. If it's more of a vertical shape or horizontal shape, make sure maybe you have another variations that is more symmetrical. And then also testing it on a darker background.